before we get started. Would you guys mind if I sat down? It'd be all right? For just a minute. Another thing that you don't know about me is I'm nursing a pretty good heart condition, so we're working on that right now. All right, so my name is Roger Richardson. I'm actually from here in Estill County. I'm pretty excited tonight because my dad's sitting right back there, and there's my baby sister. And they don't get to do this, don't get to see me do that. I don't think they've ever seen me do this, because most of these, I treat these like academic conferences, and most of these graduate seminars I go to are like somewhere. But Teresa and I live in Richmond. We live at Moberly, right by the fairgrounds. So we get around to do this. Some of you probably saw us at the Mushroom Festival. We were at the Historical Society set up in the museum there with a few of our stuff. I mainly work in this genre as a what they call back then, I can get a topographical engineer. So topographical engineer is basically a cartographer. The only difference in this day and time, most of the time, every time I do an actual reenactment, which is not very often now, but we will be in Richmond this weekend, but every time I do an actual reenactment now, and I tell them we're an engineer, they won't know if we're going to blow up something. How many veterans we got in here? None? That's really odd. Usually we have a couple. So anyway, we're going to talk to you tonight about a fellow that's pretty close to my heart, not because I'm related or not because I'm even familiar, but because he's buried in the church cemetery where I go to church up at Station Camp, at the Christian church up there, and the Captain John Wilson. Now, we can't talk to you about Captain Wilson, and this would, well, almost, yeah, that one. Thank you so much. Get up on the emblem. But Captain Wilson is how I got interested in this. I need to tell you a little bit of background. How I got interested in this. The historian of our church was a lady named Margaret Cox. And Margaret had been a member of Station Camp Christian Church since she was a kid in the early 30s, back when it was split with Baptist and Christian. Our church building is, the building now, it was built in 1814, so you can do that math, just a skosh over 200 years old now. And slideshow from beginning, please. And
That is the beginning.
let me do it. Here, go to the top. See, where's this slideshow? All right. Now, so when Margaret passed away, at that time I was still teaching. I just quit teaching this June. I retired officially in June. So when Margaret knew I was still teaching, she somehow, in the history of the church, and I can't figure out how, because he wasn't a member of our church. He was one of the founding members of the Wisemantown Methodist Church. But she had a lot of his personal correspondence, and I didn't bring much tonight. There may be a couple. I don't even think I have any. But she had a lot of his personal correspondence, letters to his wife, different things like that. And I inherited those. She said she left those to me, and that kind of got me interested, kind of piqued my interest, and got going on there. And I said, well, let's find out about this guy. Who is this Lookout Mountain hero that's on the signboard over by McDonald's? Who is this guy? I want to know about him. Turns out he's a pretty remarkable fella. So there's me and the family. This is the one that's showing the lambs, hence the FFA jacket. And Joshua's actually a car salesman, but we don't hold that against him. So that's the family. Go ahead. But there's Lookout Mountain. How many of you guys been to Lookout Mountain? Anybody been down to Sea Rock City? I know we have. Dad, when we were kids, we got down there quite often, to Rock City, to Ruby Falls, and all that, but I never got up to the battlefield. The battlefield is actually above that. So the point that we're going to talk about tonight, when we talk about the flag being raised, is going to be right here. As near as I can tell, this one or this one, but this one is Summerstown, so we're going with the Palisades because here's the Tennessee River. And you can see that from the overlook. And of course you can see the names, and this is one of my maps, and it took me a while on this one. It took me a little bit to draw this one. We'll get into that in a little while, but as you can see, Lookout Mountain was a fortress in itself, not just because of where it was. And I've never figured out yet why the South abandoned it like it did. We'll get into that in a minute. It's roughly 2,000 feet high, maybe just a little bit more. Everybody that's been to Rock City has been out on the point where you can see 7 states. And the lookout point where you put the flag is actually a little above that, on up toward the summit. But some big famous names there. It turns out our little group of men from Estill County fought with some really famous people. With Don Carlos Buell, who was the hero at Perryville. Ambrose Burnside was there. Sherman was there. William T. Sherman was there. Arrived shortly after the battle happened. So he was under the direct command of Rosecrans, who's, in the Union Army is a pretty well-known name. Of course, we all know what Lincoln said. So anyway, he was born right here in Estill County, born at Station Camp, right on the farm where he's buried at right now. His family owned that farm actually until he passed away. He died in 1889. Ironically, did not die of anything to do with the war. He died of cancer. He wore a real long beard for the rest of his life because he had cancer on his face and he didn't want anybody to see it. Captain Wilson was a pretty cool guy. Now, when all this happened in 1861, we can say this, we have to wax philosophical when we talk about the Civil War. I don't think anything that ever happened in the United States divided the country like the Civil War did. We've had wars since then. We've had, as the Bible says, wars and rumors of wars, but we've never had anything where people said, if we go to war, I'm leaving the Union. It's not happening. It's just not happening. Ironically, if you do the research that we're taught all through school until we get to college and we can think for ourselves that the Civil War was about slavery. It was a little bit. It was mostly about economics. It was mostly about economics because the people in the North saw all these folks in the South that were making scads of money and not paying the overhead, and they got tired of it. Would slavery have been abolished without the war? Yes. Within a few years. Actually, from the time the war started, within a few years, slavery would have been abolished. It had already been abolished in several states. Slide please. Back one. So this county was no exception. There was a lot of opposing views here. The city itself, Irvin itself, was very, very, very strong Union for the most part. Most of the area east of here, say Miller's Creek, Cow Creek, up that way, pretty strong Union. Red Lick, pretty strong Union. We'll get to that in a minute. West Irvin, what we call West Irvin now, Sand Hill, Possum Run, out that way, whatever the names were back then, pretty hard Confederacy. Spout Springs, hotbed. Oddly enough, a hotbed Confederacy at Spout Springs. So there were some heads knocking around here. So it was really funny because in 1861, everybody's trying to decide where Kentucky was. Even Lincoln, he said, whether God is on my side or not, I must have Kentucky. Because they told him, they said, we have God on our side. And he said, whether God is on our side or not, we must have Kentucky. You know, he knew. Kentucky never officially joined either side. You guys know that? Not until after the war. And the Union was resolved. They never joined either side. They had two governments, had two governors, two houses, two senates, two capitals. Where was the Confederate capital? You guys know? Bowling Green, yeah. But a lot of the people around here, and I took a lot of this information. There's a book at the Library of Congress that I've been digging into really hard. That is a history of the 8th Kentucky Volunteer Infantry. It was written by one of the other captains of H Company named Thomas Wright. And so I've been digging into it, published in 1880, so I've been digging into it quite a bit, and you'll see a lot of reference to that in here, but he advocated that Kentucky took the cowardly stance and voted for neutrality. And I'm thinking, cowardly? You know, but think about it, on up in the Second World War, what did we, how did the public feel about people that were COs, conscientious objectors, or didn't want to go, or even the countries like Sweden that stayed neutral, they didn't hold a very high opinion. It's like, so the 8th Kentucky was organized, and I can't tell you about Captain Wilson without telling you about the 8th, because they kind of, so the 8th Kentucky was organized in 1861 at Estill Springs. Estill Springs at that time was owned by a man named Sidney Barnes, who said that they said he was gifted with a more than ordinary talent for speaking. He was a lawyer. They owned the resort. He set up camp at the resort. That's where the soldiers stayed. By the middle of 1861, July, so every cottage in the Springs was full. And the issue became then, they had plenty to eat because everybody was excited and they were bringing them stuff, and they had plenty to eat. They didn't have anything to cook it with. So Wright says in his book that they promiscuously gathered up some pots and pans, which translates into they went out and stole them or just took them. So then the unit went to a place. Some of you guys might be able to help me with this. They met at a place in Madison County called Texas. I cannot find on any map, even back to 1860, where that was. I went through the maps, and EKU, where I went to school, that has quite the collection of pre-Civil War and pre-battle stuff that you get your hands on, and a lot of it is hand-drawn maps. I cannot find that. But anyway, September 14th, they marched everybody to Madison County, and they threw one of the biggest parties that's ever been thrown. That's why I put the picture of Fried Chicken on there. It said, Wright says in his book that most of the men dated their day of signing up as September the 14th. They got recruited that day. A lot of them did. So, a handsome dinner. Well, then Captain Wilson brought his company. He was the commander of Company C. His assistant commander was a lieutenant named William Park. I contacted William Park Hardy, Wormy we call him, that announces the football games, and apparently William Park was one of his ancestors on his mother's side. That's where he gets his name from. But he was a lieutenant. There's Captain Wilson at the age that when he enlisted. Couple things you need to know about him. I didn't bring any letters, and I should have, but he's left-handed. It's easy to tell. His sword's on his right side. His saber's on his right side, so no, it's on his left side. On his left side, I'm sorry. He's left-handed. Sash is on his left side. Pretty flamboyant young man at that time. He was about 30 years old. And the farthest he'd ever been, I think, off of that farm up there was Irving at the time. And now, organizing a unit in the Civil War and joining up now were two very different things. If you wanted to organize a unit in the Civil War, you simply got a hold of the governor and said, hey, I want to organize a unit. We want to be we want to be the 8th Kentucky Volunteer Infantry, and I'm going to be the colonel. It's okay. And he signs the paper for you. Congratulations, you're in the Army. You know, you organize your unit, then you present it to the Army to be sworn in. It's a little different than it is now. You could go to the governor and get yourself a commission and be an officer, you know, wherever you wanted to. I cheated a little bit more on that. I gave myself one, but I'm gonna do it. So, weapons were collected. Notice I have that in quotation marks. They were collected usually around here from Confederate sympathizers. So if word got out that you were leaning south a little bit, one of these fine captains and a few of his privates might be knocking on your door, and they're saying, "Yeah, where's that old squirrel rifle? We need to borrow that." A lot of times they got IOUs for them. I would dare say that most of them never came back. But if you want to see one of those up close, I have mine with me. That's an 1861 3-banded Springfield, is what that one is. Very much operational. So they spent most of the war, oddly enough, as brave as they were and as well trained. They were fairly well trained. Wright said they pretty much drilled until they got sick of it. They spent most of the war doing garrison duty, chasing people around. Spent a good deal of 1861 and 1862 in Lebanon, Kentucky, and lost altogether about 50 men in pneumonia. When they marched from Richmond to Lebanon, by the time they got to Lebanon, there was 6 inches of snow on the ground. They marched down there in December, right, and they lost their first man at Lebanon. Was a man named Granville Lady was his last name. I tried to search that out, couldn't find it, but then I got to looking at Captain Wilson's letters, and I found him mentioned in one of his letters to his wife that he had lost one man from his company, and he named him by name. And he had sent his personal stuff to his wife to get to his wife. So I thought that was kind of cool. So they Miss Perryville, they could hear the cannon from where they were, and didn't get to go. They were quartermaster duty. They were guarding horses and mules and flour and bacon and all that stuff. So they missed Perryville. They also missed Mill Springs. And Mill Springs was a very decisive battle for the Union, because it took like a very small Union force and defeated a very large Confederate force in that area, in the neighborhood of 30,000 that had came up from Tennessee, but that under General Zollicoffer. I have used that desk and drawn pictures right under Zolli's tree where he died at. The tree's still there. It's the only witness tree on the battlefield. A witness tree is a tree that was there when the battle happened. On March 9th of 62, they got on steamboats, and Colonel Barnes told them, by this time he's not only in command of the 8th Kentucky, he's in command of the entire brigade. He has talked himself into quite a bit of responsibility. So he told them they were bound for Dixie. Go ahead. So they went from there to, ended up in Fort Donelson. You can still go to Fort Donelson today. It's just outside Nashville, Tennessee, on the Tennessee River. Grant had only recently taken it. Now there's our man Don Carlos Buell. You see his name come up a lot in the so-called Western campaign. He's very, very dominant, especially in the areas over next to the river, down toward Memphis, Vicksburg. You hear a lot about Buell down there. Because right about this time, the 8th was transferred from them to Rosecrans, and then they got detached for just a few weeks under Bull Nelson. Now, Bull Nelson and I are not friends. I'm sorry, but I don't know if you guys know much, but Bull was a rather flamboyant character. He was he was different. He got a lot of men took prisoner and killed at Richmond, just to be honest with you, because they weren't trained. Incidentally, that's my wife, Teresa.
Yes, it is.
And so they had them detached and attached to Nelson, and they basically chased Braxton Bragg all over Tennessee, especially all over east and central Tennessee. In Kentucky terms, think anywhere from Monticello to Bowling Green, across the state of Tennessee, because it just didn't. They just couldn't catch it. And of course, we know what happened to Bull when they got back to Louisville, and he went to the Galt house, and the man whose wife he was messing with shot him. Knocked on the door of the Galt house, and when he opened the door, he shot him. And so that was the end of him. But so around the 10th of September, of '63, this has been another year. Around the 10th of September '63, they finally arrived at a little place, and I know you guys have heard of this, Chickamauga. And that's where they got baptized. The 8th got hammered at Stones River. They got hammered. The brigade lost around 200 men, and in the Stones River campaign up and down the river. And then they worked their way, and they finally got over next to Lookout Mountain and sat there for the longest time with the top of that mountain covered up in Confederate forces. Probably 8 or 10,000. Well entrenched. Every time they tried to go up the hill, those guys were smart. They rolled rocks down on them. Captain Wilson's letters relate a couple of his men were killed by falling rocks that the Confederates were thrown over the cliff. And of course they were under the command of Bragg, but Bragg saw as the old saying goes, the forest for the trees. But on November 24th, right around Thanksgiving, Grant decided, by this time Grant's on the scene. He's took care of Memphis, he's took care of Vicksburg, he's got pretty much control of the Mississippi River all the way to New Orleans now. And the South is pretty well cut off at this point, even though it's 2 years before the war ends. In the West, they're pretty well cut off. The rest of the war is going to be Gettysburg, Virginia, Richmond, Antietam, over that way. So November 24th, he said, let's go up the mountain. We've got to take the mountain. It's too high. They can see us. We've got to take it. And so they start up, and late that afternoon, a really dense fog rose in the valley below. So the battle got the name, the Battle Above the Clouds, because they couldn't see anything below them. Wilson and his men figured pretty prominently in this battle. They were one of the frontline units. They held a position on the left that was almost overrun by Bragg. One of the other units, one of the Indiana units, actually cut and run. And the Confederates got behind the lines for a while, so it was pretty touchy. But they went up the mountain, got almost to the top, and it got dark. And Wright says they spent one of the most miserable nights that's ever been spent on planet Earth. The temperature was really near zero. They couldn't light a fire at all because everybody's above them. Everybody's looking around up there, and you can't light a fire. As my friend Beverly Miller that I used to live by over in West Urban was a Battle of the Bulge veteran. He said you couldn't light a fire, some fool would shoot at you. That's what he said. But they spent the night listening to weapons being moved, cannon being rolled, horses neighing. The Confederates were doing something. They could hear the machinery, as it were, rumbling above them on the cliffs above them. So the next morning, their commanding general, General Whitaker, asked him, he said, I need some volunteers to go up that cliff and plant a flag. And he asked Colonel Barnes, he said, would you have anybody go? Colonel Barnes answered him, he said, the whole regiment, if you want us to. And that's the way he answered. But he picked Captain Wilson, and Captain Wilson picked 6 men. All 6 of that men were from Estill County, all of them. 3 of them are buried in the cemetery at Station Camp with Captain Wilson. They're in a row up there. The Parks boy, one of the Park boys, the Wagers boy, who I think lived in that area, and another one, are buried at Station Camp. The other three, I'm not really sure. I haven't been able to locate yet. But this is the point they went up, and you can see there's a ladder here. It said they had to pull on trees, and a ladder here, then a climb, and then a ladder here. And and the thing about there, you can see why they would call it the Battle Above the Clouds. Chattanooga lays right in here, and you can't even see the ground there. It's still very, very foggy and very, very cold. So they went up, and oddly enough, when they got there, there was nobody on the mountain. There was nobody up there. When they topped the cliff, they were fully expecting, as Wright said in his book, they were expected to be immolated for the cause, and there was nobody up there. Sometime during the night, all that rumbling they heard was the South pulled them out. Braxton Bragg had sent word to them that they needed to be on Missionary Ridge. You guys heard that before, have you? That name, Missionary Ridge? It's just down to the west of there. So, in the picture, I've identified 3 of the men. Of course, this is Captain Wilson with the flag. As you can see, he's holding his left hand. This is Captain Wilson with the flag. This is Ben Wagers, a private named Ben Wagers. This is Lieutenant Park, who had been wounded and only got back the night before. And now this guy was a private from Estill County. His name was David Arvin. And I found those, and I still can't identify the last 2. This one, you can barely see it in the picture, but he's wearing sergeant stripes. So he's the only one wearing any rank besides Captain Wilson. But they went up and planted the flag. Now this photograph, that's an actual photograph. It's a daguerreotype, I think is what it said. But it's an actual photograph. It's a recreation, just like the one at Iwo Jima. They went back up the next day and recreated the photograph. So it's a little dramatic, Wilson. So it's a little bit dramatic. But they went up, they asked him to go up and recreate it, so they went back up on the point and did it again to get a photograph of it. Wright says that when they unfurled the flag, that the whole country at the bottom of the mountain erupted in cheers. Everybody started cheering. So they had left that night. I already told you that. So, but as a result of that, Grant never really gave them any recognition for it. General Grant did. He said the battle above the clouds never happened. Basically, is what he said in his memoirs. He said because the South left, there wasn't anybody up there. Well, there are some men that are buried right here in this county that would beg to differ if they could talk to us right now. Those bullets were real, and so they. But he refused to call it a battle because he said there was nobody up there. There wasn't anybody to fight, so it wasn't a battle. But Grant was kind of like that. Grant liked to toot his own horn, but he didn't like to toot many people, other people. But he's a good guy. I have a good friend at UT. I have a good friend at UT that portrays you, General Grant, at a lot of reenactments. He's actually one of Grant's descendants, and he and I have talked a lot of the way. After that, the 8th kind of vanishes out of the books. The 8th Kentucky does. They got 30 days leave, and they got to come home. And quite frankly, several of them took French leave and didn't go back. When they had signed up at Lebanon, when they were officially sworn in, they had sworn in for 3 years for the duration of the war. And most of them are like, I got my 3 years up, I'm going home. And they did. Kentucky's pretty much free of anything to do with the Civil War by this time. The major battles in Kentucky were fought in 1862, and that being Richmond, Perryville, and Mill Spring, were all in 1862. And so by this time, Kentucky's pretty much clear of any Confederate units at all. They're just not, unless they're roaming around trying to recruit people, which they did quite often. So they ended up back on garrison duty, and they got to stay on the mountain. They let them stay up on the mountain, and a lot of the other unit commanders came up and sat on the cliffs and watched the Battle of Missionary Ridge unfold below them. Got to see Sherman and Rosencrantz and all of them doing the stuff and doing the thing and taking care of that at Missionary Ridge. Pretty much the end of the southern, well, when I wear this uniform, it's Southern Aggression. When I wear that one, it's the Great Lost Cause. But anyway, pretty much ended the war in Western Tennessee at that time. The war moved south of there, it moved into Georgia, it moved into Alabama, and most certainly moved into Mississippi. But mostly Georgia. It's about, from here is about the jumping point for Sherman's march to the sea. Was right around Chattanooga. And it just pretty much, but the war pretty much in Tennessee was pretty much done by this time. Like I said, then it moved up into Virginia, Maryland, Pennsylvania. You know, you start hearing names like Gettysburg, Antietam, you know, some of those, as opposed to the really ones that I really like talking about. There's Shiloh. Look out, I would love to do another one of these on Shiloh. I have a vested interest in Shiloh. I portray every year for the Albert Sidney Johnston Museum in Maysville, Washington, in Mason County. I portray a cartographer for them at the home of Albert Sidney Johnston, who was the only general officer killed in the entire Civil War, was killed at Shiloh. And he was born in Mason County, Kentucky. So this is Captain Wilson at a very old age. It says he was mid-80s at this time. Still very bright-eyed, as you can tell. He's got the flags behind him. Now, interesting story about those flags. For many, many years, the Union Bank down here had it for a while on display. They had the flag that came from there, from Lookout Mountain, but it actually came from Stones River. And I got a chance to get a look at it. It's in the Kentucky History Museum in Frankfort, so I got a chance to take a look at it. It is almost shot to pieces. In the middle of 1862, the governor presented those flags to the Historical Society in Frankfort to be preserved. And among those, he pointed out Colonel Barnes's for the 8th Kentucky and the damage that it had. It's about half gone, pretty much, and just really shot up. And that happened at Stones River. It was. Did they see a lot of combat? Were they like some of the people you hear, like Pickett? You know, we talk about Gettysburg, and we talk about Pickett's charge and all that. Probably not. Don't hear. You say Captain John Wilson, they're like, who? So not as much heard around anywhere away from here much. But were they as skilled and as brave as those folks? You betcha. I've read some of the training records from Colonel Barnes, and he was a very harsh taskmaster. He wanted them to know their stuff. And he wasn't one of those ride up and down the line, let's go boys, let's get it. He wasn't one of those kind. He expected his captains like Wilson and Wright and some of the others, he expected them to do their part. You know, this is what you were trained for, get it done. And so, did they play an important part? You betcha. Now, not as much as say, the other Kentucky unit, the Orphan Brigade. Everybody's heard of the Orphan Brigade. They were a Kentucky unit. They were Confederate. They were the 8th Kentucky Confederate unit. And so we hollered. You know, they fought under James Longstreet and under Ambrose Burnside. I keep on saying Sideburns. Every time I think of a picture, I say Sideburns. So they get a little recognition. The Orphan Brigade does. They fought at Shiloh and fought in a cornfield that was on fire. You know, Union decided they wanted them out of there, and they set the cornfield on fire. So anyway, I think was that it? Okay. So there's a little bit. it went a little faster than I meant for it to, but, there's a little bit about Captain Wilson. Captain Wilson lived out his life at Red Lake. When he wasn't in the war, he was at Red Lake. His mom and dad were at Red Lake. They are buried in the same cemetery. Ebenezer and his wife are. So, just a little bit about what we do, and then I will have, if you guys have some questions, we'll take some questions. So, like I said, by trade, I'm a topographical engineer. I would do stuff like that. This is one of mine. This is the tri-state area, the famous area up around Gallipoli, Virginia, and think Hatfield, McCoy, right in that strait, in that area. Just happened to be the one I had on hand right at the moment. So we would do things like that. On the table, there's some things for you to look at. I really encourage you to come up and look. Another thing we did was we designed forts and revetments, that kind of stuff. This is actually my commanding officer's. He did this one, but we would design forts and revetments, defenses around cities. For this coming weekend, I have been tasked to design a line of defenses around Lexington. So I got to get started on that. But so this is some of the other things we would do. Believe it or not, the soldiers didn't carry a lot of maps, and when they did, they would carry something like this. And I've always been intrigued by this one. They would carry a canvas map. This came from a piece of tent. We were in Barberville at a battle down there, and they burned a tent, and I salvaged a couple of pieces and drew maps on them. A lot of the soldiers, the everyday soldiers, came home with something like this in their pocket. They drew them on handkerchiefs. They wanted, if they got home, they wanted their family to see where they'd been. So they kind of did this. Like I said, this one's a piece of a tent. Pretty handy. You can wad it up, put it in your pocket. When you're fording the river, doesn't matter if it gets wet, like a paper map. So, you know, but a lot of these soldiers did this for themselves. By most standards, most regular soldiers would not have been allowed to carry a regular map. Another thing we would do is reproduce maps. This one would have been printed on a press, but this is obviously a reproduction, but this is one Camp Nelson. You can see there are several different types of revetments, defensive positions, that kind of thing. Camp Nelson was a training camp for African American soldiers. So they learned this, and they learned what different things were. I've had the privilege and the opportunity to work with the 14th Artillery at Camp Nelson several times. They're good friends of mine. Tools of the trade for us map makers. Of course, our desk. Most every officer, including Captain Wilson, would have had a desk like this. Would have been on a wagon somewhere. They would have had a desk like this. I was very fortunate. A very good friend of mine made mine for me from Civil War military specs. It's actually made by Civil War specifications, and he made it for me. He has since passed away from cancer. So this little piece of wood right here means more to me than a lot of the other stuff I've got. But we would have had inkwells. This is actually the correct one with cork in it. Different things, obviously different colors. We would have inkwells. Some colored pencils. But most of our drawings were done in ink and done with one of those. That's a fine tip quill there. That's my favorite one. That's the one I really like. I use it a lot. And it's really neat how they work. Let me find another one. Got lots of pencils in there, not many pens. have a split and a hole. You see the hole in the quill right there. And the nib itself is split. See how it splits apart? And that's what holds the ink. It will literally pull it up that split, and it will pull it up that split and into that hole, and it runs down the split, and that's how they work. The cool thing about it, it's an acquired skill, not so much as anybody can do it. We'll let you try it if you want to. But if you're doing blue and doing a river, if you stop, your river will turn into a lake because the pen will immediately unload. Some of you guys had fountain pens in school. You know how that was. So these are that way, only worse. My ink is a lot thinner and a lot different. I use an oil soybean based ink. Another thing I'd like to show you. This one is authentic, so this is a late 1870s compass that I've come into. eBay is your friend. Sometimes you never know what you're going to find on there. I have authenticated it, so it's actually still fairly accurate. Of course, it's corroded up a little bit now, and it's kind of the dial is not as free as it was, but it's I enjoy showing you guys that stuff. So, what else have I got I can show you? It's not Farby. Oh yeah, these are late 1800s, still pretty clear for their age. I've been threatening to take them deer hunting. And I've been threatening to take those binoculars deer hunting, and I'm afraid to. I'll probably drop them out of the blind. But you'd be surprised how many times I've had to chase a kid down and get those back. I kid you not. So, these, and they've got powder in them. So, these actually have gunpowder in them. These are powder cartridges for my rifle. That's about a half load. Is what that is. That's about a half load. And so, Post-it notes work charmingly well. These are a little bit big, but these are rifle cartridges. These, the key was bite the end off, spit it out, drop the whole thing in the gun, paper and all, put a patch and a bullet on top of it and stick it down. And it's supposed to help you speed load. So that's this gun. I'll hand it around if you guys are interested. Don't care a bit. Let's do this one first. This is a Father's Day present from the wife there. This is an 1861 Navy Colt. It's a reproduction. Authentic firearms are getting a little hard to find now, but they can be found. But you need to have Donald Trump money to get one. That's that one. It is 36 caliber. Shoots quite well. Does quite well. Very much operational. It will work. It has been fired multiple times. I kind of keep it roughed up. There's a little bit of a story behind that. In the red, any of you guys do reenacting anything for it? Okay, so in the reenacting business, we've got a name for folks. We either call them mom's basement guys. You know, the guys that live in mom's basement and live on cornflakes and watch cartoons. And we got those guys. They can tell you the muzzle velocity of your gun, you know, and all that, but you'll never catch them on field anywhere. But so we call those mom's basement guys. My sound guy is frowning over there. You're not a mom's basement guy, are you?
I've never had a basement before.
But we call those mom's basement guys. You know, the guys only come out on Saturday after the cartoons go off. And they can tell you when the muzzle velocity of your rifle, and they can tell you all this and all that. And in reality, they know not much of anything. But in the Civil War business, and I don't do as much Civil War as I used to. I do a lot of, we're doing a lot of First World War right now. So you may see me wandering around town here in a doughboy costume. I've done that before. But we call them Farbies because they will walk up and they'll say, "Far be it from me to say anything, but," and then they'll tell you, that your shoes are the wrong size or something, something weird. And I didn't put mine on enough. If you guys ever wore those things, I'm fortunate. Mine are actually made for my feet. But who wants to start? A lot of these were ambidextrous, they would fit either foot. So they're highly uncomfortable. I had mine fitted. So anyway, that was, but they'll say, "Far be it from me to say anything." So we started calling them Farbies. So now that's become a buzzword for somebody. We had a guy show up a couple of years ago in Richmond, and he walks in with 2 pearl handle 6-shooters and a black hat and a vest. He's Wild Bill Hickok. Long hair and the whole deal. And those are the guys we call Farbies. Those are the guys you can tell that they're just, they bought their stuff from the guy at the sutler's tent on the way in. That kind of thing. And so when we ordered my gun, when my commander and I ordered my gun, they asked us if we wanted it defarbed. And I'm like, "Do what?" I said, "What do you want us to defarb it?" And I said, "Well, what's that entail?" And he said, "Well, for $25, we'll take it out back and we'll throw it down on the ground, kick it around the rocks, and beat it up right good, and it'll look authentic." Yeah, sure. So this is how my gun came in. My buddy that built that desk has got one that's shiny as a new penny, but this is how mine came in. Mine has been defarbed. This is a 59 caliber. Like I said, 3-banded Springfield, 1861. It is also a reproduction. There's a company in Italy named Paetta that does very, 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 very good reproduction firearms, especially for this period. They also do Revolutionary War muskets. I almost said Rev War. That's kind of what we say in the business. But thing weighs 12 pounds empty. Now, could you imagine walking from here to Chattanooga, Tennessee with one of those? Plus your rations. If you wanted to eat during the Civil War, like this 8th Kentucky, this unit of Captain Wilson's, if you wanted to eat, you had to cook your own rations. You would get orders. You would get orders the day before. Cook 3 days' rations. We're going on the march. And those rations considered mostly hardtack, which is just really hard where you salt, bacon. If you were lucky, you might have a little sugar. Maybe. Confederates had more sugar than they did anything, which is really crazy, but they did. Salt pork, whatever you could find. So there were a lot of cows that were mistaken for rebel soldiers, especially in Tennessee. A nice cow came along, he got mistaken for a rebel soldier, and well, he's dead, we might as well eat him. So that's kind of the way that worked. And there are several accounts in Wright's book where they basically cleaned somebody's garden out and wrote them a little note and said, "We'll be back later to pay you," or the officers would pull their money and pay them. They did try to pay for most of the stuff if they took a pig or a cow from your farm. A lot of times the commanders would try to get the cash up and would try to pay the person. It wasn't as bad as you think. Dad passed on that when he's seen that thing 25 times probably. The life of a soldier during the Civil War was 10 days of monotony and 2 days of absolute screaming ease. I mean, it was just, Believe it or not, that thing shoots really well. I've been threatening to take it deer hunting, just to say I hunt in Barron County in western Kentucky, and it's not a question down there if, it's a question of how many most of the time. And I've been threatening to take it down there and shoot a deer with it, just say I did. I just think that'd be cool. Oh, you were wanting to draw, wasn't you? Okay. Let's find you a piece of paper. Let's just do this. We'll get some black here and you can. Sketch pad good. Sketch pad. You get you a sketch pad here. Oh, I didn't know you were crooked. Sorry. I would have brought it back there to you. Football injury, right?
No, actually hiking, helping them out.
Oh, hockey. Scout.
Yes, sir.
What troop?
2014.
Oh.
We're in Richmond.
Yeah, I know. I helped found that troop.
Oh, wow.
Yeah, my son's one of the Charter members, 114.
Cool.
So you guys still deal with Phil White?
Yes, sir. I know him very well.
So, I'm gonna let you, I'll do it about halfway, see about where I went, about halfway.
Do you
Yeah,
need to take
try to
it
write
up
you.
closer to what?
Well, I'm probably gonna have to move it real close.
See you, Dad. Oh, not bad.
He's left-handed.
Usually, I got you. A little harder than it looks. Well, you'll try something else, go ahead. And so, normally you can't push those pins, you have to pull. So when I do a map, I do everything from the top down, otherwise that ink all up in my sleeves and all that stuff. And if I know the cops wouldn't get us, we'd charge this thing, go outside and pull one off,
No, you don't. Not mess with you.
just to see who came out. You're not doing bad at all. You're doing better than me. Sometimes I cheat. I've got a couple of black pens, regular pens, 5 months in there. Sometimes my borders and stuff, I cheat just a little. So, uniforms. Now, Confederates didn't have the capacity to make stuff that Union troops has. As you can see, this is unlined. This is Richmond wool. It is unlined and it's just about like wearing a burlap sack. Just be honest with you. Feel the texture of it. It's just about like wearing a burlap sack. And so, this is an old uniform. This is my lieutenant's uniform. Like I said, I promoted myself. Now the Federals, they were a little bit better off. This is my captain's coat. As you can see, it's lined and a little heavier. That one is a sack coat. This one is a frock coat. Difference between this one just a little bit longer. I like a frock coat. I got all this freeboard out here in front, and I like a frock coat a little bit better because it gives me a chance to not poke out so much. And so that's that one. That's what that one does. All right, you guys got any questions? I'm just rattling, and I'm going to sit down here and try to answer a few of them for you. Nothing? Come on. I know somebody knows something. So,
Part of that display you were talking about that used to be at the bank,
yes, sir.
there was a piece of timber there that was loaded down with lead.
Yeah, with lead, had several in it.
Was that supposed to have been from Lookout Mountain?
It was supposed to have been, yes, sir. As near as I can find out. I couldn't, a lot of that when I talked to the museum in Frankfurt had gotten mixed in with everything else they got from the Civil War.
Yeah.
And it's like, okay, here's a box of musket balls. Or here's some timber with bullets in it. And sadly, I mean, it's run by volunteers. And so they're lacking in the information department a little bit. And I've really thought about maybe trying to help them some. I did an internship, probably been 10 years ago now, I had at Whitehall, and I digitized all of Green Clay's papers. We digitized all of them, so I spent the summer out there with a magnifying glass trying to decipher that stuff. I found the original land grant, and I have a copy at home. I found the original land grant for Red Lick, the whole 8,000 acres. And so Green Clay agreed to survey it for half of it. And of course, he took the choicest half down on the creek. I found that searching for stuff about our church. I'm currently about 5 chapters into a book on the Station Camp Church. There's been a church on that property since 1774. Started out with circuit riders. And it was always rumored that Squire Boone, Dan Wood's brother, was circuit rider. He was a Baptist minister. And it was always rumored that he had preached at that church. I could not find any records where he ever preached in Kentucky. He stayed mostly east and southeast of Kentucky, on the other side of the Gap, down on the Yadkin River, down in that way. It was, yeah, a lot of that stuff's got jumbled up. And, it's a Civil War display now. The flag is readily identified. Interesting story about that flag. Some ladies here in Irvin made that. They made it out of silk, which was probably a little hard to come by back then. As a couple of ladies probably lost their petticoats. And they presented that to Captain Wilson personally and told him to carry it proudly into battle. Well, a lot of people say, well, that's the one he had on Lookout Mountain. It was not. The one that the ladies gave him was virtually destroyed at Stone Creek. And that's the one that the Kentucky History Museum has now. But still pretty remarkable that they've managed to preserve it all these years. They have several neat exhibit, if you ever get a chance to get down there and see it, is their battle flags. They have flags they even have a couple of Revolutionary War flags. Of course, Civil War, First, Second World War, Mexican War, they have several battle flags. And I get into that stuff. I'm kind of weird. My wife says I'm weird. I like to wander around cemeteries. And so I've managed to visit several now, and she thinks I'm weird, but me and my granddaughter, the one that's showing the sheep, she go with me. We like to wander around cemeteries and pick out graves of people. I lost a first cousin in Vietnam, so I had the chance. I was presenting research in Washington, actually in College Park, Maryland, University of Maryland, and we were in Washington, and I had a chance to do a rubbing of his name on the wall. That was pretty neat to get to do. He lived in Hawaii. His dad was a Marine, was stationed at Pearl Harbor, and he lived in Hawaii. And I only got to meet him once in my life, and he was on his way to Vietnam and was killed there. Stuff like that, and this it appeals to me. Now we get more into the nowadays. We're getting more into the maps, into the cartography. We're leaving now. A lot of places are asking us to do designs for forts, gun emplacements, that kind of thing. In our little storage building, we have surveying instruments. We have measuring devices, good to change, if you know what that is. It's a chain that the lengths are a specific size that you can measure distance with. Like I said, we've got surveying instruments. We've got plane tables where we can orient maps. You know about orienting maps. If you work with Phil, you know about orienting maps. He's all about that stuff. just, we've gotten more into that, and then as a result, as I've gotten older and developed this little heart problem that I play off like it's nothing, but she doesn't. And, so, I've gotten more into the living history. I like to do stuff like this. And like I said, I'm a retired teacher. I taught middle school for 17 years. I didn't go to college until I was mid-40s, maybe close to 50. Elizabeth got out in 2000, yeah, probably close to 50. Went back to college. I have 2 bachelor's degrees and almost a master's degree. I have a bachelor's and a master in history, and oddly enough, with this accent, I have a bachelor's in English lit. Got really into the medieval stuff, Chaucer, some of that stuff, when I was in college. Don't like Shakespeare though, but anyway, they referred to me at EKU for a long time as the Eternal Colonel. I went to school year-round, summer and winter, for the better part of, 12 years? Something like that. Because I'd see something else I wanted to do. And that's how I got into this. I had to take a geography class, a geography GIS class, and oddly enough, that the guy that taught the class name was Glenn Campbell. And I said, all right, here we go. I got to take this one, right? His name is Glenn Campbell, and he and I became really good friends. Started having lunch about every day and everything, and lo and behold, one day he says, hey, I'm thinking about getting into Civil War reenacting. You want to go? Sure, and kind of took off from there. I was as farby as everybody else when we first started. I think the first day I went, I had a coat and a pair of blue jeans and work boots. And we went to Van Lear, Kentucky, which, by the way, is about as not-no place as I've ever been in my life. I mean, the whole town's like this big. But it was a pretty neat little reenactment. We attacked a busload of Japanese tourists. They held their own for a while, but we got so we did. My son got to get in on that. That's enough rattling, I guess. I really appreciate you guys coming. I wasn't expecting, with the fair going on and everything, I wasn't expecting to be a lot of people here. And I'm just thrilled that you guys came out. I really appreciate it.
Thank you.
Well, you're welcome. I hope I did it justice. There may be a part 2. We're already discussing that. There may be a part 2. I'm going to get a little more into the family side of it and pull out some of this correspondence. And that there's one, I meant to bring tonight one letter that I really wanted you guys to see. And today got away from me, quite frankly, and I got in a hurry. And I forgot it, but there's one letter to his wife that I have now where he had sent his son, and his son at the time was maybe 10, and he had sent him a drum that he picked up on the battlefield at Stone River, and the little boy that was drumming it had been killed, and he sent that drum home to his son. And so I would really have liked for you guys to see that and saw his handwriting. It really neat. He left-handed, so everything's slanted this way, and he had a real flow, and he's a really hard one to read. Most time I don't have a lot of trouble with that, but that one was really hard. When you work on it sometimes for school and for a living, I used to do it with my kids in my history classes at school, and I'd say, okay, what's this say? And, we'd do a little unit on with the inkwells and stuff, and we would get into some of that and try to decipher some of it. Sometimes it's a lost cause. You have to just kind of guess at it. Green clay was easy to do when I did that at Whitehall. His writing was very straight and very blocky. So was Cassius. His writing was very straight and very blocky, so they were pretty easy to decipher. A lot of Cassius Clay's correspondence was printed. If you couldn't find it in his handwritten notes, you could find it in his flyers, his little anti-slavery flyers that he published. Some of the same writings were in there. Almost got him killed a couple of times. What did I do with this? And that was fun, finding out about assassination attempts. Who knows when Cassius Clay died? What day of the year, what day of the month? Halloween night, October 31st. There was an awful, awful storm going when he passed. And about 2 hours before he passed, there was a horsefly that had landed on the ceiling of the room he was in, and he reached down beside the bed and picked up a .22 rifle and shot it. Which is typical Cassius Clay, but we're venturing off the subject now. They teach you guys, still teach you guys in school that Cassius Clay was an abolitionist?
I'm homeschooled, so.
Oh, well,
We haven't got there yet.
yeah, well, he wasn't. He wasn't an abolitionist, he was an emancipationist. He freed all his slaves, but he could care less if you had some. Basically, is what that translates to. Dig into that sometimes, pretty interesting. So I hope you guys enjoyed it. I know I don't see anybody asleep, so that's always good. So I hope you guys enjoyed it. We sure appreciate you having us here. Thank you to my engineer over here that took care of everything for me and everything. You guys got any questions at all? Anything? I don't care. You know. Nothing. Well, all right. I appreciate you coming. I thank you so much. Any more questions?
Did your son ever work for Gates last night?
He did.
Thank you so much.
Didn't work for Gates. He worked for the Ford. Yeah. He
Chevrolet
works for,
dealership in
Look like
Richmond.
and he worked for Frank Burke, Jack Burke for a while.
Thank you, man.
Thank you.
It looked like you guys sold my niece.